Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Bengal folklore, written down by Behari. This story is a bit of a sad one, and it features a tiny bit of cannibalism. The king wants a baby, and then everything goes sideways. But just remember that they are all mangoes. Okay? Let's begin. The Boy Whom 7 Mothers Suckled. Once upon a time there reigned a king who had 7 queens. He was very sad, for all 7 queens were barren. A holy mendicant, however, told the king that in a certain forest there grew a tree, on a branch of which hung 7 mangoes. If the king himself plucked those mangoes, and gave one each to all of the queens, they would all become mothers. So the king went to the forest, plucked the 7 mangoes that grew upon one branch, and gave a mango to each of the queens to eat. In short time, the king's heart was filled with joy, as he heard that the 7 queens were all with child. One day, the king was out hunting, when he saw a young lady of peerless beauty cross his path. He fell in love with her, brought her to his palace, and married her. This lady was, however, not a human being, but a Rakshasi. But the king, of course, did not know it. The king became dotingly fond of her. He did whatever she told him. One day she said to the king, "You say that you love me more than anyone else. Let me see whether you really love me so. If you love me, make your 7 other queens blind, and let them be killed." The king became very sad at the request of his best beloved queen, even more so as the 7 queens were all with child. But there was nothing for it but to comply with the Rakshasi queen's request. The eyes of the 7 queens were plucked out of their sockets, and then the queens themselves were delivered up to the chief minister to be destroyed. But the chief minister was a merciful man. Instead of killing the 7 queens, he hid them in a cave which was on the other side of a hill. In the course of time, the eldest of the 7 queens gave birth to a child. "What shall I do with the child?" said she, "now that we are blind and are dying for want of food? Let me kill the child, and let us all eat of his flesh." So saying, she killed the infant, which turned back into a mango, and gave to each of her sisters a part of the fruit to eat. The 6 ate their portion, but the 7th or youngest queen did not eat her share, but laid it beside her. In a few days the 2nd queen also was delivered of a child, and she did with it as her eldest sister had done with hers. So did the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th queen. At last the 7th queen gave birth to a son, but she, instead of following the example of her sister queens, resolved to nurse the child. The other queens demanded their portions of the newly born baby. She gave each of them the portions she had set aside. The other queens at once perceived that their portions were dry, and could not therefore be parts of the child just born. The 7th queen told them that she had made up her mind not to kill the child, but to nurse it. The others were glad to hear this, and they said that they would all help her in nursing the child. So the child was suckled by 7 mothers, and it became, after some years, the hardiest and strongest boy that ever lived. In the meantime, the Rakshasi wife of the king was doing infinite mischief in the royal household in the capital. What she ate at the royal table did not fill her capacious stomach. Therefore, in the darkness of night, she gradually ate up all the members of the royal family, all the king's servants and attendants, all his horses, elephants, and cattle, till none remained in the palace except she herself and her royal consort. After that, she used to go out in the evening into the city and eat up a stray human being here and there. The king was left unattended by servants. There was no person left to cook for him, for no one would take his service. At last the boy who had been suckled by 7 mothers, and who had now grown up to a stalwart youth, volunteered his services. He attended on the king, and took every care to prevent the queen from swallowing him up, for he went away home long before nightfall. and the Rakshasi queen never seized her victims except at night. Hence the queen was determined in some way to get rid of the boy. As the boy always boasted that he was equal to any work, however hard, the queen told him that she was suffering from some disease. It could only be cured by eating a certain species of melon, which was 12 cubits long, but the stone of which was 13 cubits long. That fruit could be had only from her mother, who lived on the other side of the ocean. She gave him a letter of introduction to her mother, in which she requested her to devour the boy the moment he put the letter into her hands. The boy, suspecting foul play, tore up the letter and proceeded on his journey. The dauntless youth passed through many lands, and at last stood on the shore of the ocean, on the other side of which was the country of the Rakshasis. He then bawled as loud as he could and said, "Granny, Granny, come and save your daughter, she is dangerously ill." An old Rakshasi on the other side of the ocean heard the words, crossed the ocean, came to the boy, and on hearing the message took the boy on her back and recrossed the ocean, so the boy was in the country of the Rakshasis. The 12-cubit melon, with its 13-cubit stone, was given to the boy at once, and he was told to perform the journey back, but the boy pleaded fatigue and begged to be allowed to rest one day. To this the old Rakshasi consented. Observing a stout club and a rope hanging on the Rakshasi's room, the boy inquired what they were there for. She replied, "Child, by that club and rope I cross the ocean. If anyone takes the club and the rope in his hands and addresses them with the following magical words, 'O stout club, O strong rope, take me at once to the other side,' then immediately the club and rope will take him to the other side of the ocean." Observing a bird in a cage hanging in one corner of the room, the boy inquired what it was. The old Rakshasi replied, "It contains a secret, child, which must not be disclosed to mortals. And yet, how can I hide it from my own grandchild? That bird, child, contains the life of your mother. If the bird is killed, your mother will die at once." Armed with these secrets, the boy went to bed that night. The next morning, the old Rakshasi, together with all the other Rakshasis, went to distant countries to forage. The boy took down the cage from the ceiling, as well as the club and the rope. Having secured the bird, he addressed the club and rope thus, "O stout club, O strong rope, take me at once to the other side." In the twinkling of an eye, the boy was put on this side of the ocean. He then retraced his steps, came to the queen, and gave to her astonishment, the 12-cubit melon with its 13-cubit stone. But the cage with the bird in it he kept carefully concealed. In the course of time, the people of the city came to the king and said, "A monstrous bird comes out apparently from the palace every evening and seizes the passengers in the streets and swallows them up. This has been going on for so long a time that the city has almost become desolate." The king could not make out what this monstrous bird was. The king's servant, the boy, replied that he knew the monstrous bird, and that he would kill it, providing the queen stood beside the king. By royal command, the queen was made to stand by the king. Then the boy took the bird from the cage, which he had brought from the other side of the ocean, on seeing which she fell into a fainting fit. Turning to the king, the boy said, "Sire, you will soon perceive who the monstrous bird is that devours your subjects every evening. As I tear off each limb from this bird, the corresponding limb of the man-devourer will fall off." The boy then tore off one leg of the bird in his hand. Immediately, to the astonishment of the whole assembly, for the citizens were all present, one of the legs of the queen fell off. And when the boy squeezed the throat of the bird, the queen gave up the ghost. The boy then related his own story, and that of his mother and stepmothers. The 7 queens, whose eyesight was miraculously restored, were brought back to the palace, and the boy that was suckled by 7 mothers was recognized by the king as his rightful heir. So they lived together happily. Thus my story endeth. The Nadia thorn withereth, etc. The end. That story. Wow. It was fun, but the original had them eating baby meat, and that was a bit much for me. Perhaps on a Sandman After Dark episode, I have half a plan to make the folklore stories that are too gruesome or sexual for the regular feed into a different show. I love the relation to the Indian and Turkish stories, plus the Rakshasis. All in all, it's just a fun story. And the podcast shoutout is to Verbal Diorama. Hosted by M, this show goes behind the scenes and tells you all about how a movie gets made. She gives you the inspiration and the path the movie takes until it gets made. It's a wonderful podcast. I suggest listening to the episode all about WALL-E. And if you like her show as much as I do, give her a like, a rating, and a review. And the listener shoutout is to Malé, the capital of the Maldives. It is one of the most densely packed cities in the world. There are over 200,000 people living in just over 8 square miles. It is a cool mix of Dravidian people who migrated to the islands from South India and Sri Lanka, and there's also an Arab influence, which can be seen in the writing system and some of the vocabulary. Would I like to visit? Oh, heck yeah. And so to my listener in the Maldives, I say, Shukriya Adi Heo Regande. Thank you, and good night.